Welcome back to the One Question Leadership Podcast. I'm Glenn Caruso, head football coach at the University of St. Thomas, and so happy you tuned in. You know, quite often we get so caught up in the daily grind of work or coaching or recruiting that we don't often take time to reflect. I would encourage everybody to take just a few minutes each day to try and see the bigger picture, to stop and realize that in the end, we're going to be judged on what we choose to believe, who we choose to love, and what we decide to leave behind in the hearts and minds of not just our players, not just our coworkers, but also our children. And remember, if we're doing it right, we're coaching football for life.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guests today are Coach Saddi Washington and Coach DeAndre Haynes. Coach Washington is an assistant coach at University of Michigan, and he's been at Michigan for 5 seasons now. Greetings, Coach. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Ty. How you doing? Appreciate you having us on today.
Doing good. Coach Haynes, you're assistant coach at University of Maryland and just finished your first full season there at Maryland. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ty. Appreciate you.
Now, gentlemen, I want to make sure I get your backgrounds right. Now, Saddi, you've been coaching college basketball for 14 seasons. You worked for a while with Greg Kampe at Oakland University, and of course 5 seasons now at University of Michigan, initially with John Beilein, and now with first-time head coach Juwan Howard. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. I was at Oakland University for 10 years and then have done going into year 5 here at Michigan.
Okay, excellent. And then Coach Haynes, first year there at Maryland, then you spent time before that at Michigan, at Toledo, and at Kent State. I have all that correct, right?
Yes, correct.
You guys have worked for some successful head coaches, and I want to talk to you a little bit about success as a leader, about coaching and work dealing with players through the pandemic. So I'm excited about this conversation. You both worked for some successful head coaches. Of course, you both worked for Coach Beilein. You worked for Coach Kampe, Saddi, and DeAndre. You're working now for Coach Turgeon, who you guys Big Ten champions this past season.
Really, you got to put that in there, Ty. You gonna sting us like that? Like you gonna start the interview?
I'm a Spartan, so you got to get, when you're interviewing people, you got to give them their just due, right? But I'm a Spartan, so all of it's things, right? So anyway, we'll keep moving forward.
Good. That's my brother right there, so it's all good. It's all good.
We got one big family.
Right, exactly. So in terms of progressing to the head coaching position, now I've talked to a number of ADs and I've talked to a number of search firms, and they say that it's very important to work for a successful head coach or have a successful champion who can vouch for you when you are going through the process of interviewing for a head coach. And I assume the people you guys work for, you've learned a lot from. So I want to think about the leaders you've worked for and then your own leadership style. What traits have proven to be most beneficial for you over the last few months during the pandemic and really over your career in terms of working for great leaders? Coach Washington, we'll start with you.
Well, I think that, that's a really good question. And I've been very fortunate enough to have 3 elite level mentors and bosses in Greg Kampe, John Beilein, and now in Juwan Howard. I think from a playing perspective, Coach Kampe really was elite from an offensive mindset of just putting his players in position to be successful, allowing them to be the greatest version of them. And we had a tremendous amount of success on the court, winning a couple of championships there. I would characterize Coach Beilein as like the master CEO, and Dre would know this and could speak to this from our time at Michigan. But his preparation in terms of how to build a program, how to sustain success, is elite level, as well as obviously being a great on-court basketball coach. And then from Coach Juwan, he's just a great connector of people. And from a basketball perspective, he thinks a lot like Coach Beilein in a lot of ways from an offense perspective, and is an elite level defensive coach as well. And so how all that has shaped me and my personal leadership style, I think the things that I pulled out of that to kind of shape my leadership styles is being poised, intentional, and authentic. And I think, in the midst of chaos, which I guess you could call the pandemic right now is chaos, people look to leaders to make decisions. And I think that's where you got to, be able to disseminate information, whether it's in a game situation or whether you're coming off of a plane crash like we did the one season at Michigan. People are looking for you to make sound decisions and then be intentional about it, because the next words that come out of your mouth, could be life or death, or winning or losing a game, or, helping a young man to make the right decision, and then delivering it in a very authentic way that people believe and can trust and know that produces an outcome of success. So those are the traits that I've kind of drawn out of my mentors as coaches.
Right. And in terms of the pandemic, how did Coach Howard handle season being stopped and moving into it, and also this last few months in terms of engaging the players?
I think that's where his authenticity and his just ability to connect with people really kicked in, because we were one of the first teams actually the Big Ten tournament, we were on the floor ready to play our first round game against, Rutgers? And we just got pulled like 20 minutes before the start of the game. And so being able to, relay that information to the guys, everybody's obviously very hurt, but trying to keep the big picture in mind of, we got to do what's best. And it's just been an ongoing process, just building our culture throughout the summer, making sure everybody's mentally and physically healthy, and just leading so that whenever we get on the other side of this, we're ready to go. And I think that's been a really strong trait that Coach has been able to deliver to our guys. And it's been a fun summer, even in spite of all the uncertainty and chaos that's been going on.
Right. Coach Haynes, on that, you worked for Coach Beeline, now you work for Coach Turgeon there. You guys are coming off a championship. Talk to me about the last few months of the leadership traits that you've seen have proven beneficial over the last few months.
I worked, Coach Turgeon has been great throughout this whole process. His poise, him being honest and transparent. And the main thing for me is him being able to be, communicate with our players and their parents and be transparent with them about things that were happening and progressing throughout the pandemic was the key to, leading during this time. Add to that, heightened racial injustice we're experiencing, and it all boils down to keeping an open line of communication with them, with our players and their families. So just building that trust, so we, when things go left, they know they can look to you as a, reliable source of information and encouragement coming from Coach Turgeon and the way he led, this program. And although there has been so much sadness and fear happening during this time, I know it's given a rare opportunity as coaches to get to know our players on a deeper level without basketball. So we just able to tap into these young men outside, during these times. Coach Turgeon, to me, he started having a weekly Zoom calls with our team since the murder of George Floyd and the pandemic. We had conversations, where we was able to, have really eye-opening to what incredible young men that we have and have a pleasure of coaching. So I just take my hat off to, learning that from Coach Turgeon. And another thing throughout this pandemic was, my faith was at an all-time high. I like to use, Vince Lombardi's quote, it's not whether you get knocked down, but whether you get back up. That's something that I love to use. And we all going to go through tough times. We all going through uncertain times right now. And there'll be many more bumps in the road. But to me, I love to talk to our players about things that I went through in my career and in my life, from being a player to come down to $1 overseas. I had to go, over there and, persevere and get through some things, or talking about my current situation when I first got to Maryland. Coach Beeline, you wake up in the morning, you look on ESPN, and Coach Beeline's going to the NBA. And then you wake up another morning, you find out you're not getting retained. But then you had to persevere, through those things. And that led me to Maryland, to us winning the Big Ten championship, to, beating Coach Saddi, who's on the phone right now. But but to me, I love to preach to our players that, in life, you're going to face challenges, and you're either going to let it shape you or scar you. And that's one thing that I took from this pandemic. And, we're going to get through some of these things, through a lot of these things right now. You got to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And one of the main things I learned at working at Michigan was you got to embrace sudden change, and appreciate what you have. And that's something that we always talk about to this day. And I talk to Saddi almost every day about that. And, one thing about embracing sudden change, when I worked at Michigan, Coach Beeline had heart surgery. We had to travel abroad without him. and we had to put in offense and the defense and have practice without him. So we had to embrace that, embrace that change. And then coming to Maryland, we down 20 plus in a few games. So you had to fight back. You had to stay together. You had to stay united. And we take these experiences that we have now on the court, and we try to apply them off the court in life right now. So that's a lot of things I've been taking from this pandemic is the communication piece and the leadership we have from Coach Surgeon and then some of the leaders that I had in the past couple of years.
Haynes, it's interesting, one of the things you said there, and really both of you guys, I wonder about engagement. I mean, of course, Coach Watson, you said Coach Howard is really good at engaging people, relating people and connecting people. And of course, Coach Haynes, you mentioned that, and of course, Coach Turgeon is a veteran head coach. You mentioned that you've gotten to know the players at a deeper level over the pandemic. I imagine Coach has too. Talk to me a little bit about engaging, especially when people were in the streets expressing frustration over racism, over injustice, over police brutality, and a number of things that we've seen in the country for a long time. Sorry with you, Coach Haynes.
For me, his leadership and his engagement, not only just like calling our players, but calling the parents to check in on them. And, that's one thing I had told him, like, we got to show the leadership in that aspect, because these parents trust us with their kids when we're recruiting them. It's great. It'd be great for us to reach out to them and let them know that we still here for them through all these tough times that we do. So the Zoom calls, the book, he have us reading right now, Martin Luther King, Why We Can't Wait. Him being active on social media and him actually opening up to our players and showing, like, he cried on a couple of our Zooms. And just to show that he really cared about what's going on, he's actually fighting for his players. I thought that was huge. And just showing that he's engaged and he's willing to educate himself on a lot of things that's going on. Not only just reading a book, but he's actually watching movies now. He's actually, looking up all kind of things to educate himself. And he's bringing it to our Zoom calls. And we have an open Zoom call where, it stays within the Zoom. You can be yourself, and sometimes he'll tell you, like, he didn't know, really how to say things. And we have Pastor Donnell Jones, who's moderating our Zoom call. And when I tell you the leadership I've seen from him and our seniors and everybody who's been stepping up has been amazing. And I think that's one of the big things that's keeping our team together throughout these tough times is him being able to really educate himself on what's going on.
I imagine you thinking about the rest of your career will probably implement some of those things as you move forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Coach Washington, you talk about working for a first-time head coach and Coach DeJuan Howard. You're talking about working for someone who really has never been involved with the college game since he was involved with the college game as a player. And then now he's a head coach, right? He's been in the pros, and I imagine there's an educational factor in terms of him learning from you guys as assistant coaches and then you learning from him in terms of how the program works and his ability to connect people like you mentioned, and just the difference between him and Coach Beilein in terms of running the program. Talk to me a little bit about that aspect of onboarding a head coach as an assistant, but then also you learning from him in terms of what experience he brings.
Yeah, so, I had the fortune throughout my career of walking into programs that were already successful and were already in motion at Oakland, and then when I came here under Coach Beilein at Michigan. And even as the transitional piece from Coach Beilein to Coach DeJuan, it gave me an opportunity to at least experience what it's like to kind of start from scratch, so to speak, even though there was still familiarity with the program, because we had a completely new staff and just trying to make sure we kept all the players on board. We didn't have any guys transfer in that initial year. Coach DeJuan, but even before Coach DeJuan got the job, like every summer, he would come back to Ann Arbor and hang out with us for a day or two, and we would just talk shop. And I'm talking about with our staff, and he would share the Heat culture, and we would share the Michigan culture, and some of the things that we were doing. And so that's where the relationship between he and I started. And you could just tell even then, like, man, this dude is very smart. Like, he's very smart in the way that he thinks about the game, which is a reason why so many NBA organizations were eyeing him as a potential head coach. And so he was only going to take one collegiate job, and that was at the University of Michigan. So the transition for him is funny because, like, that's Juwan Howard. Like, you forget, like, he is the author of the Fab Five. And so, you know, just watching him make that transition from the first day he got the job, speaking with our players to the press conference, and just like all the different directions that people were trying to pull him in. And then, oh, by the way, coach, we have to recruit or re-recruit this class. And so really making him understand the intentional level of recruiting and how constant and nonstop it is. I think that's always kind of the biggest adjustment for NBA guys when they make that transition. And to coach's credit, I think he made a pretty seamless transition. Now, I do believe that it was a little bit easier for him because obviously he has two sons that were already playing on the circuit with Jace, who's in our program now. And I guess I could say his son without commuting because it's his son, but Jet. And so he has some familiarity with, you know, the young men out there on the circuit, either from his sons playing against him or them being on his team. So I think that he had a pretty good idea from a recruiting perspective, some of the young men that we wanted to recruit and which direction to go in. But still, there's a learning curve there that, you know, has to be met. And, you know, myself and Coach Martelli were constantly trying to help bring him and Coach Isley up to speed in terms from that standpoint. From a basketball perspective, you know, like just rules like there's no advancing of the ball or, you know, little stuff like that. But, I mean, Coach, you know, I think has done a tremendous job of just really making that transition because he's a competitor and he'll tell you like he's for competitors only. And so like this being his first opportunity to lead a program, like success has followed him all of his life and it's not going to stop now. And so I was just excited to be able to be a part of his transitional staff of what I call the new glue in helping him be successful and being successful as a first-time black head coach because, you know, for Dre and I, that's really important because his success means opportunities for us. And, you know, we're trying to champion that as much as we can. So, as well as our AD Ward Manuel, who's black and who's an African-American. So we understood, or I understand, like the importance of the decision that was made when Coach Juwan was hired. And, you know, the importance of helping him run with his vision, you know, moving forward and trying to put us in a position where we can win Big Ten championships and national championships.
You talk about the inflection points in your career. I imagine for you, Coach Washington, this is your first time working for a first-time head coach, right? The other guys were veteran head coaches, and so now you mentioned that, right? Now he comes in, you're educating him. You're probably also learning about different leadership styles to lead a successful program. What it takes if you're a new head coach, right? Let's say you get a job next year, 2 years from now, the blueprint you have to think back to, right, is Coach Howard there. So I wonder what you would take from that if you got an opportunity in the next couple years as a head coach, like right off the bat. If that major inflection point happened, what would you take from him in his first year as a head coach?
You know, I think that Coach is a very, and I use this term, he's a very poised decision maker. And like, I think that has benefited us well thus far. I mean, we were able to come out the gate early in this season and, you know, we won a big time tournament in down in the Bahamas and then started off the year red hot. And then just to kind of watch him evolve and growing and building and implementing his new system, the work and the diligence it takes to put into that. A lot of our preparation was the same in terms of our day-to-day business, how we prepared, the video study, you know, scouting reports and all that stuff. But just being able to get a fresh perspective from Coach Juwan and the NBA mentality is something that I'm definitely going to hopefully inherit and use forward one day if I'm able to run my own program.
And then you talk about organizational leadership. You said Coach Beilein came in. He's a CEO type leader. Tell me how you have either adapted that when you're talking to players or when you go off to become a head coach on your own. How will you implement that type of mentality in terms of organizational leadership on the grand scale from the CEO mentality?
Well, I think it's just that day-to-day preparation.
Dre would know this. Like, we would get a morning text every morning with the whole day scripted out, and we would confirm the text. And I think that was awesome because, you know, Coach wasn't a micromanager, but it did allow people to know exactly the expectations of that day or the expectation of what was coming up. And he always say, like, I hire great people, so go be great, right? And so it allows you to kind of be a star in your role. And I really want that, you know, for myself, hopefully one day, where you hire great people, you trust that they can do the job that you hired them for. And everyone has a clear understanding of the vision of the program. And now it's our responsibility to have that growth mindset and get 1% better every day. And, you know, hopefully when we look up, we're winning championships in the classroom and on the court.
Right. Exactly. Now, you talk about inflection points, Coach Haynes. You talk about being there a year, and you guys are the current Big Ten champions. Coach
Correct.
Saban always says that you can never take it away. So there's no right. You can't take that championship away unless you get in trouble or something like that. But you are the current champions, and you will be until there's a new champion next year. Well, hopefully next year, right? I wonder about inflection points during the season. You look at the leadership that the head coach has to give to his or her assistants, and you look at the leadership that the assistants have to give to the player, and the leadership all around, internal, external, up, down, etc. And you guys win this Big Ten championship, and then the season is canceled during the tournament. So it ends with you guys being the champion. But I wonder about the leadership you saw in that inflection point, the leadership you implemented yourself in that inflection point, and how can you learn from that type of thing? You mentioned earlier working for Coach Beeline when he had a medical situation and couldn't be there, and you guys had to step up to the plate. But talk to me about just when the season ended and you realized, you know, this is it. We're still champions, but that's the end of the season. We got to go inside.
Well, you know what? That's a great question. I can remember that day like yesterday. You know, my family and I we packed up the car. We headed to Xfinity Center to practice. You know, right before we touched the floor, we got a call from our AD saying that the Big Ten was canceled. You know, it always been my focus to pour into our players, you know, spiritually, mentally, financially, emotionally. So, you know, that when basketball is no longer a part of the plan, they aren't suffering from identity crisis. So I talk to these guys every day from the first day I step on campus, even with Coach Turgeon, some of the things that he does. So right now, since that has happened, you know, Coach Turgeon has empowered me and he delegated some things to me. And I told him, you know, I'm currently working on this mentorship program, implement a mentorship program to where our players don't just see themselves as only athletes, but can make an impact in this world in other ways as well. And that's one thing that I've seen is like basketball was just stripped from us. Like right now, you know, Anthony Cowan, he didn't know what was next. I just remember seeing the look on their faces and in the locker room when Coach Turgeon huddled up the team to let them know the season was over. And just being in that moment goes back to me preparing them for life after basketball. Because because the ball stopped bouncing one day, whether you like it or not. Since this pandemic, you know, I had a player come to me, you know, question himself that what's my purpose, you know, without basketball? And to me, go back to my experience, you know, as a player, I've been through that. Like I experienced that personally when I retired, stopped playing, you know, basketball overseas. I had a business degree with no business plan, you know, so seeing basketball stripped from these guys, you know, was an eye opener for me to say, you know what, it's deeper than basketball. You know, what can we do now to have these young men, these young women look at themselves and say, you know, I can be a lawyer, I can be the president, I can be a judge. And that's what I took from that, because to see their faces, to see like what's next, and for our players and everybody not to know, you know, what's going on in these uncertain times, that's something that hit my heart and that said, I went through this before, but I'm going to make a change. I want to make a change. And then the department is on board. They actually about to help start it up. So that was something major for me that I seen throughout when that day when it first happened, because I talk to these guys every day and they still don't know, you know, what I want to do, you know, what's next for me. So I think implementing this program would be huge for the future here.
Right. It probably will be. And at some point in the future, I'd love to have you back on talking about the program, how it's implemented and how you're evaluating its success, you know, over a period of time. I wonder from both of you guys. Of course, Coach Washington, you've been at Michigan for a little while now. Coach Haynes, you're at Maryland for a year. It's looking like college football and other fall sports won't happen in 2020. Obviously, the Big Ten is canceled. Other conferences have canceled. There may be more coming. I wonder about you guys talking to any of your coaching colleagues at your respective schools or just out there outside of basketball. I mean, have you guys spoken to anybody, and how does it affect the mind of a coach? Coach Haynes, you just told us how it affected some of the guys you coach, but I wonder how it affects the minds of a coach to say that there won't be a season. You guys won't be able to either continue playing or to play at all. And then also, like you mentioned, the student athletes who won't be able to start a season, unless you guys got through at least the regular season championship. But have you guys talked to any of the coaches there on staff at Michigan or at Maryland? Coach Washington, if you want to start that off.
Well, I think we all have to keep in mind the big picture. And I think right now you start to discover who is your real circle of friends, right? Because Dre and I, we talk almost daily, every other day but our relationship goes back a long ways. And so, I think now is a great opportunity to, just check on one another, to share ideas, because I say this, like, we're in the season of reset. That's what pops up in my spirit when I reflect on all this. And I think more time than ever, I can speak personally, and I know Dre is the same way. We will never get this amount of time back as coaches in terms of being able to spend and lock in with our families, right? Because normally this time of the year, we're out recruiting, well, especially in the month of June and July. And so for me, as crazy as everything was been, it was actually the best thing that probably could have happened for my personal life, because as a husband and as a father, I'm able to, in a lot of different ways, reconnect and get to know my family on a deeper level. And I don't know that they always enjoy me being around, but hey, we got an opportunity that, that we normally don't get at this time of the year. And because the reality of it is, Ty, is that, there's no blueprint. Like, this is the one period of life that no coach, nobody has the blueprint of what we're supposed to do. Like, we're all figuring this out together, right? And so as coaches, as friends, as colleagues, like, it's our responsibility to make sure we maintain a healthy physically, mentally, spiritually, socially, and everything in between, because there are no one right answers to get through this. But the goal is to get on the other side of this as healthy as we possibly can, personally, collectively, as organizationally, financially, and everything in between. And so the mental health, of our student athletes is big. And Dre mentioned it, earlier with, just the reaction of us, and I'm speaking men's basketball, missing out on the season. And now all the fall sports seem to kind of be in jeopardy of doing that. And so hopefully we do have a season, because now if we have to miss out, God forbid, on a second season, think about what that does emotionally, not just to our student athletes, but again, also to the coaches, because our livelihood has been wrapped up in this sport. And so for me, it's just checking on guys like Dre, his family, and a couple other circle friends of ours, and make sure we all come out better versions of ourselves when we do come out of it.
All right, Coach Haynes, I wonder if you've talked to any coaches outside of the sport of basketball there. You did mention something I thought was pretty profound, is that a player coming to you saying, what is my purpose if I don't have basketball? And they're lucky to have somebody like you around to answer that question. I wonder, have you talked to anyone outside of the sport of basketball in terms of, hey, look, we went through this in the spring. Here's how we handled it. We played the season. You won't happen to play this season. How are you guys handling it? Talk to me a little bit about that aspect of just engaging with other people.
Well, you know what? I spoke with one of our players and his girlfriend. We sit down. I love to sit down with them and get to know how their day is going and how they're feeling about everything. So one thing that I did do was, I went to them, how's your girlfriend doing? She plays lacrosse. And then I wanted to know, what is she going through? Because her sophomore year, they actually won a national championship here in Maryland, right? And then her junior year, the spring, it got canceled, due to the virus, so they was able to play 5 games and then their season was canceled. And then now she's a senior and they usually have like fall games. So now she can't play any fall games because that's canceled. And then here our athletic director said that, there is still not sure that we'll play sports in the spring. So just to me, like, they prepare to win championships just like we do. And to see them not be able to like either chase their dreams or have that opportunity to step on the field again or hear that one shiny moment, see the confetti come down on your head or just compete, just compete another day. I felt like it was tough to hear from him. I actually talked to a player yesterday. We just out and he walked up to me. He told me, Coach, like, we made a decision, they made us pick like A, B, or C, whether we want to play or not. But before we even made our decision, they canceled the Big Ten. But I'm actually excited that we're not playing because I had a friend that actually died on the field from a heart condition. So these players, like Coach Saddi just said, we got to worry about these kids' health, and that's the most important thing right now. And the thing I've been taking from this pandemic, like, just to piggyback on Coach Saddi, was getting closer with God for myself and getting closer to my family. That's been the most important thing, is just to have these relationships, to reach out to everyone and see how they're doing. Like, this time gave me time to reach out to the coaches I played for, my old teammates. We have our old Michigan group chat. Yeah, we all talk to each other. Our wives talk to each other. Just keep reaching out to people just to check on them. So I haven't talked to a coach at the University of Maryland. I talked to a few players, and we definitely praying for everyone that's going through this situation. And one thing I do know is that we will get through this thing together. And the one thing I love about Maryland is we have these shirts. They say it's one Maryland, and that's all of us combined. And it's going to take all of us to get through this thing together, to keep praying for each other, to be there with each other, and stay united. And that's what I can say about that and about that question. But I appreciate it. That's a great question.
Yeah, excellent. And you say that they're in Maryland on campus, with each in your individual sport, in the athletics department on campus at Maryland, in the conference at the Big Ten, in the whole of college athletics, all of academia, in the nation, in the world, right? We'll all get through it. I have a philosophy that says the key to a peaceful existence is to master the ability to adjust accordingly. And that adjustment can be tough sometimes, but in life, you got to keep moving forward. And it sounds like you guys are figuring out how to do that in terms of your staff, in terms of the players you coach. And I really appreciate you guys joining us on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ty, again. Thanks, Coach Dre, for joining me. I'm going to try to get in some more recruiting calls so that we can figure out how to win the next Big Ten championship. But I love you, brother.
I love you too, man. I appreciate you always.
You guys are hilarious. That was Coach Saddi Washington. He's an assistant coach at University of Michigan. And Coach DeAndre Haynes, he is assistant coach at University of Maryland. And of course, I am Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.